So Natalie, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Cripps, Commissioner Greenfield,
Here.
Commissioner Lemire,
Here.
Commissioner McCulley,
Present.
Commissioner McDougall,
Yes?
Commissioner Moss, Commissioner Rechtel, Councilman Sharp.
Thank you. Are there any agenda changes, requests, deletions from any of the commission members? I will note that I think we can move through the agenda pretty much on schedule. We do have an offer that if we get to number 5, the Cubberley Community Center, that could be either done very briefly or moved to another time. I'm determined that we do the rest of the agenda well enough that we get to that item. I think it's an important item for the members here. So if there are no other proposals to change the agenda, I'd like to invite comments, oral communications from members of the community on topics other than the topics we have here. And the first card I have is from Monica Williams.
Good evening, Chair McDougall and Commissioners. I'm Monica Williams, President of the Palo Alto Pickleball Club. On behalf of our members, I'd like to give you an update on the growth of pickleball in Palo Alto. We play every weekday at Mitchell Park, and yesterday, one of our volunteers, Kathy Levinson, offered a free pickleball clinic. 44 people showed up. We also had 10 people playing on the 2 new pickleball courts, a total of 54 people, and that was on a Monday morning. The national championships have just been held in Indian Wells, which is the home of the second largest tennis stadium in the world. Over 2,000 participants played on 40 pickleball courts, and we're very proud that some of our members of the Palo Alto Pickleball Club won 2 gold medals and 3 silver medals, competing against the very best players in the nation. Every weekday, weather permitting, we are inundated by many residents coming to Mitchell Park to play or to learn how to play pickleball. This is a community feast for friendship, exercise, and camaraderie. Unfortunately, the 2 new pickleball courts can accommodate only 8 people. The city of Santa Cruz has 4 permanent pickleball courts. Foster City has 4. Walnut Creek has 8. Sunnyvale has just installed 4 permanent courts, and Concord has 14. Clearly, Palo Alto Parks and Recreation is lagging far behind its neighbors. Just a year ago, we were presented with a proclamation for the health and benefits pickleball provides the community. However, we're still playing pickleball every weekday morning on 3 dilapidated and filthy tennis courts next to the magical playground. Each day we have to get out of storage and set up 11 portable nets, whilst 4 just recently resurfaced and beautiful tennis courts are mostly empty. We have given you all the pickleball data you could possibly need, so our question is, what can we do to actually make something happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Mark Weasel.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mark Weiss. I live in Palo Alto. And I was one of 40 or so local residents who came out on November 10th for a glorious morning up at Foothills Park. I saw Commissioners Greenfield, Rechtel, and McDougall there, as well as staff Darren. I want to give kudos to staff, commissioners, the grand jury, and activists for helping us finally dedicate the 7.7 acres of park. And I look forward to seeing what else we can do with that spot. But what I'm here for tonight actually is rinking out a pool. I have been quite disturbed from what I've seen in the press, and I read staff report, and I've had a few conversations with this, including some ad hoc time running into staff in the lobby or at the cafe. And my sense, I've lived here quite a while, I'm kind of a duffer as a lap swimmer. My sense is that this isn't quite right, so I'm really glad staff and council pushed it back to December 10th. And I apologize that I did not come to the meeting when it was on the agenda, and I know you did adjudicate it or discuss it, deliberate it, and I know we have an Olympic swimmer as a commissioner. But my sense is we can get a better deal. If we're going to privatize an asset like that, I think we can get a much better deal. In comparison, I've been doing events in Palo Alto for 25 years, not quite a PPP, but I've rented the Cubberley Theater for a number of times and produced events in the parks, including as recently as October 18th, I rented Mitchell Park for a jazz concert with Allison Miller, who was on tour. I paid $1,000 for one night. It ended up being about more than 50% of my budget. I cannot believe that the best we can do is 1% for an asset like that. Of the first $1 million, we're getting $10,000. That seems abominable. I'm sorry if that's disrespectful, but I just think we have to look harder at this. I have a hard time believing that out of 60 RFP respect for proposal that the only person who responded was the ad hoc incumbent. I think if we can't stop it dead in its tracks and rethink this, maybe just give them a year. And as an externality, yeah, Carol McPherson, Terry Baxter, they're very well known in the community, and it's a smallish group, but I really don't think you want to displace our masters either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark Weiss. Next item on the agenda is the department report.
Thank you. Kristen O'Kane, Community Services. I have a few things, and then I'll turn it over to Darren Anderson, who has some additional items to report on. The first is I did want to let you know, and I guess Monica know too, that we will be bringing pickleball to the December meeting. It will be on the agenda, and we're hoping to have a little bit more movement on a plan for some additional pickleball courts. So we're still working out some details. So I just wanted to let everyone know there will be something, and that meeting is December 18th, not the normal fourth Tuesday. So we are making some progress. As you know, things just take some time, and there's a lot of little details to work out. So we're working on that. And then just a reminder, everyone knows that the aquatics item did get moved from last night's council meeting to the December 10th council meeting. We don't have it on the agenda tonight, so we aren't discussing it, but I just wanted to remind everyone of that, and then also just say that we're continuing to communicate with the different parties. Our city manager will be meeting with Carol McPherson, and we'll also be meeting separately with Tim Sheeper. So we're continuing to have dialogue on the issue, and we'll go from there. And then finally, on a event coming up this Friday is our annual holiday tree lighting event in Lytton Plaza. That's at 6 p.m. And there's lots of performances by youth and adults, all holiday themed, and I hope some of you or all of you can come out and enjoy the tree. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Darren now.
Good evening, Darren Anderson, Open Space, Parks, and Golf. I wanted to thank the commissioners that were able to attend that Saturday, November 10th grand opening and ribbon cutting for the 7.7 acre area. I thought it went really well, and once again want to thank all the commissioners and ad hoc members who attended and helped make it happen, and especially Chair McDougall for helping MC. Did a really nice job. So thank you for that. I want to remind people that there's a Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan meeting this Thursday, 6:30 p.m. at the Mitchell Park Community Center, Adobe Room. We'll be covering the preferred ITT rental wetlands concepts. This is something that the commission weighed in heavily. There's the revised plan that reflects all the feedback that'll be presented. We'll also discuss the draft action plan, which has the elements, goals, methodology, and maps, and then a draft Bixby Park conceptual plan, and get input from our stakeholders, and we're bringing that back to the full commission soon. The Baylands Boardwalk project, just wanted to give you an update. The project is progressing well now. However, there were some delays in getting the wood necessary for the project, much later than we thought. And it will mean missing the original date that they had targeted completion, which was January 6th. However, the contractor is still confident they'll have to meet the deadline of their permit, which is January 31st. So they still believe they'll meet it, but just wanted to apprise you, due to the delay, we think the project will be a little longer than anticipated. In about 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be adding a bike rack to the golf course, something we've talked about a little bit in the past, and excited to finally make that happen. Should have been included in the original design, but we're going to make it right now. It'll be located near the front door to the cafe. I wanted to also update you on the Foothills Park trails. We had 2.1 inches of rain this month at Foothills Park, and I was concerned about how those new rerouted trails would fare. It's uncompacted soil, and of course, as you know, the previous areas had been washed out with rain. So far, they held up really well, and we'll be monitoring it with the next significant rain event. And that concludes department report.
Are there any questions or comments for Darren or Kristen?
Regarding the Baylands Boardwalk, so does that mean it will be open by the end of January?
I believe so, unless there's some last-minute button-up work that's unaffiliated with or doesn't interfere with the permit regulations, so things that wouldn't cause any noise, that kind of thing, small punch list items. But other than that, I believe it would be the end of January we'd open.
And would we want to consider some sort of soft opening for the boardwalk, similar to what we did at the 7.7 acres?
I think that's very appropriate, yes.
Great. And finally, great work on the trails. I was out on all the new trails on Friday, and they were just after it rained, and things were in good shape.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Sure. Kristen, not to go into the substance of negotiations, but is the staff anticipating for the aquatics program to make a different recommendation than that they presented to the commission earlier this month? I guess it was last month, excuse me.
Thank you for that question. The item was moved because the agenda was very full last night. So the last item finished, I think, at 11 o'clock, so they were anticipating that the aquatics item wouldn't start till 10:45, 11, so in anticipation of that, that's why it was moved to December 10th, and the exact same staff report will be posted this Thursday. That was posted for last night's meeting.
Okay, so do you anticipate any resolution then of the issue between Rinconada Masters and Team Sheeper?
When you say resolution, I'm a little hesitant to go into too much detail just because this isn't an item that's on our agenda tonight. So could you clarify, I guess, what you mean by a resolution?
Well, so we obviously, at our last meeting, heard from lots of folks who expressed concern about the staff recommendation as it stood in October. And it principally dealt with the Rinconada Masters program and the perception that it wouldn't be renewed, and that at that time there were still negotiations going on between the city and Team Sheeper. So I don't know if those negotiations have concluded or not, but if they have, do you anticipate that that issue is resolved?
Well, the contract was negotiated, and it's included in the staff report that the contract's signed by Team Sheeper. So we expect to have the same staff recommendation going forward on December 10th.
And forgive me, I haven't seen the staff report that went to the council. So what is that recommendation?
to approve the contract.
including a subcontract with Rinconada Masters?
No, it's a contract with Team Sheeper, just as Jasmine presented to you on October 23rd.
Okay, so then there isn't a resolution at this time concerning any subcontract with Team Sheeper and Rinconada Masters?
It's not part of the staff recommendation.
I understand that the staff recommendation is limited to the other piece, but the other, I'm just wondering, is the other component resolved? Do we think it will be resolved, or is it still something that is outstanding and unlikely to be resolved?
I don't, I'm hesitant on what to say in this venue again, because this isn't an agendized item. So I feel like we're getting a little bit into the weeds on this item, but as I said, we're presenting the contract to council. It's a contract between the city and Team Sheeper.
Kristen, I would agree that I think as part of, and I with due respect to Commissioner McCauley's interest and questions, I think because it's non-agendized, we're on shaky ground, and I would prefer that we move on to the next item. Thank you. I do want to add a couple of comments. Relative to the 7.87 acres and that opening, I think it's really important that we recognize the work that Darren and his crew did, and particularly the work that Kathleen and her crew did. They were up there doing all sorts of stuff the day before when I went up and checked over there, and I think the Rangers just did a wonderful, wonderful job in the event and in preparation for the event. So please pass on our thanks to that. You mentioned the Baylands Comprehensive Plan. I plan on attending, and I want to encourage the other commissioners to attend. I think that that's getting to a really interesting point where we can make contributions. I agree with the comment about soft opening. I would go so far as to say in this particular case, we don't need to do a soft opening like we did. We could just do an official reopening or whatever. I think the kind of reaction we got from council members for the 7.7 acres, any Baylands publicity and any publicity that we can get for the kind of work that's being done would be useful. So anticipating that, and I know you can't pick a date to have that opening yet, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be, on that exact date or something, but I would encourage that. And I'd like to echo the work you did with the trail and the follow-up work with the trails. And with that, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of the draft minutes from October 23rd. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have one letter I'd like to change. On page 37, line 5, that's a statement I made. I agree with that. You've elucidated the rule of an aspirational document, and I would just want to change rule to role. So we'll change the U to an O, please.
Commissioner Greenfield, could you repeat the page number and?
Page 37, line 5.
I actually have that page here and marked it, if that helps with that correction. I thought maybe we could have made it the role and the rule.
However you'd like to rule.
Are there any other questions or comments? Could I have a motion, please?
I move to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? With that, let's move on to the next item, which is the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan.
So, Kristen O'Kane, Community Services. I just wanted to introduce two of our Public Works staff, Karen North and Pam Boyle Rodriguez. And tonight we have a Public Works focused agenda, which I think is great because we don't hear from them that often. So the first item is on the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan, and I'll go ahead and turn that over to.
Sorry, really quick, the AV techs want to remind you guys to turn on your microphones because they're not getting some of the recordings if you don't turn them on. Okay, thank you.
So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Karen and Pam.
Hi, Commissioners. This is Karen North, the Watershed Protection Manager. Pam Boyle Rodriguez is my fantastic stormwater manager, and she's been working fast and furious, as well as Isabel. Can you say her last name? Sakartsuk, which I butcher every time. So our staff has been working fast and furious on this Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan, so Pam's actually going to be the one giving the presentation, but I just want to introduce her since you have not met her yet.
Okay. So it's on.
Yep, it's on.
Okay. So today we wanted to share with you some information about what we've been doing to develop our Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan, or GSI plan. Okay. Sorry about that, 1 second. Okay. So we're going to talk about what GSI is, a little bit of background about the plan and the stormwater permit that requires the plan, and some challenges that we ran into while we've been developing the plan and proposed solutions and our next steps. So first of all, what is GSI? GSI, as I mentioned, Green Stormwater Infrastructure. Yes, okay. Traditionally, we've been managing stormwater by trying to get it on the street from our driveways into the street, down the gutter, into the storm drain inlet. And unfortunately, that alleviates a lot of ponding and flooding, but it picks up a lot of pollutants along the way from a lot of paved surfaces. And those pollutants go into our storm drain system, straight into our creeks and our bay without getting treated. And so we're trying to look at how do we integrate GSI, which is uses more natural processes. So right here on the right, you have what's called a bioretention area or bioretention basin that has soil mix that is of a particular, has mostly compost and sand, and it allows the water to infiltrate. It has a particular plant palette there that with plants that can uptake pollutants. And as you can see over here, there's a curb opening that is taking the stormwater runoff. If there's too many storms in a row, there's something right here called an overflow, so it will overflow into here and it goes into the storm drain system, so it doesn't go back onto the street. So what we're doing with this plan is trying to figure out, looking at our public facilities, our right-of-way areas, and how can we integrate GSI back into our system so that it's a combination of the traditional approach and a newer approach with GSI. There we go. Here's an example of a three-way intersection from the Charleston-Arrested Corridor project that is being constructed right now. And this is what it looks like now, but the artist's rendering here shows that it's going to have much safer pedestrian and bike safety components. There's going to be a lot of medians, a lot of trees, increasing canopy along that corridor. And then right here, here's a bioretention area. You can see that there's curb openings to capture the runoff from the street, but it's also, as you can see compared to here, it's sometimes called the bump out. And so it allows for cars that are approaching this pedestrian area and this intersection, they're forced to slow down. So not only does this area help to treat stormwater, help infiltrate rain, but it also provides some safety features to the street. And it basically changes the name of this type of street from a complete street, which has a lot of bike ped safety, to what's called a sustainable street. And just to want to go back to the top just to point out that, as you all know, this is Mitchell Park. It has a green roof. It has some pervious parking, and it has medians that receive the stormwater runoff from the parking. All those are type of GSI features, or sometimes called stormwater treatment measures. This is from the Southgate neighborhood. The bottom here is from our pump station at Matadero Creek that we just finished. It has pervious pavement. And this is a Middlefield Kellogg project for bike safety. So going back to the presentation over here, all the counties in the Bay Area have to meet some requirements that are from the Regional Water Board that write a permit called the Municipal Regional Stormwater Permit, or the MRP. And one of the many requirements in there are that all cities in the Bay Area have to submit to the regional board by the end of September of 2019 a GSI plan that identifies GSI project potential for all current planned and future CIPs on city property or on the right-of-way. And they may or may not have projects or incentives, requirements for private property, but definitely have to identify potential for public property. And so that's why we're working on this GSI plan to submit it by September 2019. Last year we had a framework or an outline signed by our city manager and submitted to the Regional Water Board. A couple of other things we have to do is we have to show as a county that the GSI implementation does equal to pollutant load reductions to the bay. So that's done with a lot of very calculated calculations that I'm not going to go into right now. And this other bullet about conduct early implementation, because the GSI plan takes a while to develop, the regional board wanted us to make sure that we are identifying potential to put GSI in projects that are going in the ground now. A lot of projects that have been large CIPs that have been identified, the Fire Station 3 that's going in now, they are all have required, actually, because of the size of the project, to have GSI on their property. So these are some the basic components that are going to be in the GSI plan. It's a pretty thick document, but in general, we've identified various project locations. These are all public property owned by the city. Project locations, not project concepts. And we've prioritized those according to particular criteria that we think works for the city. We have to have a system to track these projects, whether they're going to have GSI or not. We have to show the Regional Water Board that we're really vetting these projects as a city. We have to have guidelines and specifications for the construction of these features. We have to integrate the concept of GSI in all our city plans. So we need to update our pedestrian and bike safety plan. We need to update our comp plan. Luckily, the comp plan was just updated, and it does have some mention, sufficient mention of it, and the North Ventura coordinated area plan that is going on right now, we're working to integrate GSI into that. So any future plans that come up, any future policies, we have to not only acknowledge GSI, but really integrate that concept into our work from now on. We have to evaluate how we're going to fund the implementation of this plan. So a lot of times plans have to be created and then they might get put on a shelf, but the regional board is taking this seriously and they're making us really figure out how are we going to pay for these projects. We have to come up with a plan, a schedule, basically all our next steps of how we're going to make this plan happen, and the next permit that's currently being negotiated and going to be in play in a couple of years will probably have a lot of new requirements about how we have to implement the plan. So while we've been for several months working to develop this plan and meeting with staff and doing a lot of research, we've identified some challenges that we know we need to solve or find a solution to so that we can implement this plan successfully. And one of those things is that we've realized that public and private properties aren't using standard specifications for these GSI features, which can result in some issues when we're inspecting these sites to determine how effective they are. And as there is also a related issue with some of these things not being constructed according to design. So we're working on, we're going to be contracting with a consultant to create some very specific engineering guidelines and specifications that meet all the public works and utilities requirements, so that we also know how to deal with utilities that are in our street, whether they're existing or planned updates. Another thing is that the stormwater management fee passed last year, but there is a limited allocation to GSI. Most of that stormwater fee is going to our more traditional storm drain system upgrades, which we also need. But we need to identify some additional funding. So after the plan is accepted by City Council, one of our next steps is to work on a very comprehensive funding needs and opportunity study so that we can figure out how we can fund these projects, both construction and perhaps more importantly, maintenance. We also realized that we need to update our stormwater muni code, and it just so happens that we're also doing that right now. So we're putting adequate language in there so that we have sufficient authority to implement this plan per the permit and to enforce it. Probably one of the most important things is that we're really working internally with a lot of staff and trying to figure out what tools do we need to put in place so that we can all assess GSI potential in a very standardized way. We're hoping to use a map-based process with GIS and criteria that we all can agree on, at least as a first step. And we'd be doing field tours or field site visits and things like that. We have to come up with that process so that we're considering it consistently internally, and then we can present that to the public in a consistent manner. As you know, we have a lot of facilities that already have GSI. We have Rinconada Library, Mitchell Park. We have a couple of pump stations with pervious pavement. We have the Southgate neighborhood. And what we know now is that we're not maintaining these consistently, and we need more information about how well they're doing, how well they're being maintained over time, how effective, are they being as effective as they should be, as how they were designed. And so we need to monitor these better, we need to maintain them more consistently, and staff needs to be trained, and contractors need to be trained as well. So we're also going to be hiring a consultant to help us with a maintenance and monitoring plan to assess our current features and to help us create something for the future. And as you probably know, there's mixed emotions about GSI, especially when they're in certain parks and in neighborhoods. Not everybody might appreciate all the benefits that a community can have from GSI. So one thing we're going to work on is an outreach strategy to try to share the benefits, all the multiple benefits that GSI can bring. And when it's integrated with all the plans, I think that will also help. I don't know if any of you saw this, but last summer, I think in August, there was this handout with our utility bill insert. And one thing that we tried to do was try to get people to think beyond small-scale cistern on a site or a pervious driveway. We're trying to get people to realize that, hey, we can do this at a street level. There's a stormwater planter receiving roof runoff. There's permeable pavement along the sidewalk. Here's a bioretention area. There's 2 or 3 here that are receiving runoff from the street. Here's a tree well filter that, these are basically, they're called suspended pavement systems, but they're basically like plastic crates that allow roots to grow, allow the trees to grow tall, meet urban forestry guidelines with soil volume requirements, but also we can mix in soil that can infiltrate stormwater as well, the particular soil mix that we use in the bioretention area. So this was one of our first steps, or our major first step to the public, to get folks to understand how large we can get citywide. Our timeline here's a general timeline. We, over the summer, completed what we call a 50% plan. We've been meeting for over a year with the Stormwater Oversight Committee, which was appointed to oversee the expenditures of the stormwater fee. We also met with the City Sustainability Board, which has a lot of executive leadership on it. We're going to continue working with the Stormwater Oversight Committee. Next month, we're meeting with we're presenting to the Planning and Transportation Commission as well. Next month, we're hoping to have an 85% plan that we'll make available to everyone for review. And in around February, it's not in this timeline because it came about after we finished this, but we're going to have a public meeting and hope to have a 100% plan ready around March. And we have some time between April and June allotted in case we need to go to council more than once, but we're hoping to go to council around April and get it accepted by June. And as I mentioned, it has to be submitted to the regional board with our annual report in September. So we're going to be working on for next steps. We're really going to be digging in even further into how we're going to implement this internally. We have a website. We're going to improve our website. We're going to be working on scope of works and put out RFPs next year for those consultant products, and hopefully get our plan accepted next year so we can really jump into implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Jeff, I'll start with you at that end.
Sure. I appreciate all your work with this, and I think it's a great environmental benefit to us, both getting pollutants out of the bay and recharging groundwater. Although slightly off topic, I always find it interesting to see what is put into the stormwater drains, and I'll walk by a house that's building a basement and they're pumping out millions of gallons of water into our storm drain, which is not on this topic, but just something that came to my mind. Will we be trying to do some projects that would affect existing infrastructure? So for example, Ross Road, which already has bump outs for when they constructed the bicycle lane there, the bicycle area, and that seems like a maybe low-hanging fruit for that. Is that correct?
Yes, so it does. In front of the YMCA, it has one stormwater feature
great.
there, but to be honest, it wasn't designed as best as it could be. So I agree, we should look at how to retrofit some of those areas. I think once we do the maintenance and monitoring plan and get a better sense of what is not working well, then we should look at retrofitting. And we'd have to talk to an engineer about how easy it is to retrofit some of those areas.
Right.
But yes, good point.
And then my other comment would be, it's interesting that we're also potentially talking about synthetic turf tonight, and that would seem to be a great project where we're worried about runoff from the synthetic turf and how this could partner with that and capturing some of that runoff from whether it's the pellets or whatever is on that artificial turf that we choose. So thank you very much for your work with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. I do think it's a very good thing to work at. Raising the water table around the parks is going to help the vegetation, help the trees. So I think there's a lot of beneficial aspects for the whole community. But big picture, is your plan, does it just like best practices, is it just recommendations, or is it mandatory requirements for all these?
It's mandatory. We're requiring that all the plans be updated. We're going to be, we have to, we can't necessarily require GSI at every single CIP or every single project because there's no funding at the moment. So I think that's the largest obstacle right now. But what we are doing is requiring that it become more of a standard operating procedure. When staff is considering a project, one of the number one things is, can you integrate GSI? It doesn't even have to be something like a major project. It could even just be thinking about, okay, I'm not going to let the roof runoff go to the pavement. It's going to go to landscaping. How can we design this project so that we minimize impervious surfaces? So it can be just from looking at different ways to design the site, to doing more, maybe what we've been talking about with the public service building is that there's going to be trees all along that area, and I mentioned the trees with the suspended pavement systems, those plastic crate things. We're trying to see if we can capture additional runoff from the surrounding streets, because those trees are going to be in the sidewalk there anyway. They're being put in as part of the project. Well, can we leverage that? Can we do a little bit more? We've done, a rough calculation of maybe for 20,000 extra, we can treat about 12,000 extra square feet of impervious surface.
So is the hope that there'd be a separate fund that would pay for this, or that the incremental cost would have to be absorbed by the project itself?
I think partly it's going to be absorbed by the CIP. The maintenance is the item that we're not sure about how we're going to deal with, because like I said, to construct the bioretention area is $20,000, but we have to maintain it for the life of the project. And
Yes. And so would you anticipate that these requirements would be in the form of like 10% of your budget has to go to this, or you have to have these features, or how would you regulate this?
I would say we're not sure yet.
Okay.
I think we're wanting to hear feedback from management and city council. Do you have anything to say, Karen?
I would just say that as we go through the plan development, that we're going to have some options available, and then it's going to have to make decisions will need to be made. I mean, our ultimate goal is that GSI and stormwater treatment will just become integrated and integral in the system, in the city, and how we maintain and manage our landscape, because it's a benefit to the community. So rather than it's a requirement or a mandate, it just becomes business practice that we look at a project and we see how can we improve it and how do we get more, because it basically complements all of our comp plan, our sustainability climate action plan goals, our urban forestry goals. So everything is integral, and so that's, I think, where we're going to try and see if we can just change the mindset. But the key for us is really going to be funding. And that's what a second piece that a consultant's going to be, is how do we be creative about maybe trying to get another funding source in.
Okay.
So.
I mean, we're talking to people around, what they would think of these retention ponds. I think there's generally a positive attitude towards them. People do wonder, what about mosquitoes? What about, are there going to be weeds there that are growing since it's going to be very wet? What about the mosquito issue?
So the bioretention areas, for example, they have to be designed so that they infiltrate within 48 hours,
Okay.
so that is not a mosquito issue. We don't really have any plan to put in retention ponds, like large ponds, because we just don't have room for that in our city. If that came about, then sometimes they do things to aerate the water. So the mosquito abatement control district is very involved with our permit as well, and they actually go out annually and inspect all these features that we have.
And now the vegetation that's in these areas, that has to be able to absorb all this water, or tolerate all this water. What about during the summer? Do you have to irrigate that?
It does have to be irrigated, yes. At some point, they are drought-tolerant plants, most of them, so they're not a type of plant you might see in a wetland or something like that, because the soil has a lot of sand, so it doesn't necessarily have standing water. But some of these features do have to be watered in the summer, at least for maybe 3 years until well established.
Okay. And the other thing was Bull Park, we had that plan that was proposed about, we actually would be capturing water and treating it and retaining it. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So that was a very preliminary concept that was part of a larger countywide stormwater resource plan.
Do we anticipate projects like that going forward, or was that just?
I'm sorry?
Do we anticipate projects like that going forward?
Perhaps in other locations. We would consider that, but we don't have any plans for a project like that. It's basically like an underground tank. And something like that can only be installed in parks that have a pretty large field. There would definitely be some compromises to be made by the public because the fields would have to be out of play for a year or less. But it's in areas where we have a lower water table, it could very much make sense, especially as we have more and more droughts, we have a lot of impacts from climate change. It makes sense that if folks need to water the parks, that we're reusing the water that's coming out of the sky. The treatment system underground includes a lot of pre-filtration so that whatever is used to irrigate is very high quality. You can build monitoring stations there, and you test that water over months, and until you're sure that it's the quality that you need. So it's not dangerous in any way. We would regularly monitor that water. We have a sampling team that does regular sampling from our group anyway that could be involved. So it's done in a lot of others outside of the Bay Area. It's done in a lot of other cities. There's a project right now in South San Francisco that is going to be built with a lot of Caltrans funding. So it's not a novel idea, and it hasn't been shown to be dangerous in anywhere it's been done.
But I would think the price tag would be pretty high.
It's very high, yes.
And would it be just cheaper to run purple pipe to every park?
You said purple pipe?
Purple pipe.
So purple pipe is actually really expensive. So we've been working since 2007 to look at doing a purple pipe expansion project up to Stanford Research Park, and it's around $45 million. We just had a study session with council last Monday, the 19th, where we were discussing different options of what do we want to do with recycled water. So that's a whole nother discussion. Basically, right now, it looks like council they each had their own opinion. We didn't actually ask for an action item because it was a study session, but they all sounded like they want us to look at doing direct potable reuse rather than purple pipe, non-traditional, non-potable, and utilize maybe our groundwater basin or other water sources that we have within Palo Alto versus running purple pipe projects throughout our city because of the price tag. So there's more to come on that, and we're spending a lot of time on looking at basically purified water, enhanced recycled water, lots of fun stuff. So if you ever want us to come back and talk to you guys about that, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay. Actually, I would love that going forward.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the presentation. That's great. One question, just out of curiosity. Do these GSI features, particularly the streetscape-like features, have a lifespan where you expect you have to go in and replace the GSI features after some period of time?
It does vary between pervious pavement or a bioretention area, but bioretention area has a lifespan of about 25 years. You do have to go in there, maybe, depending on the land use, maybe after 8 years to replace the soil. And then there's typical landscaping type maintenance, like the compost should be, it should be composted every year, and you have to replace plants as otherwise we have to make sure the pipes don't get clogged yearly, and all that maintenance is done by our staff. But other than that, they maintain pretty well. The pervious pavement has to be vacuumed regularly. Ideally, you wouldn't put it in a place where you might expect a lot of fine sediment to blow over it. Probably wouldn't make sense to put it next to a beach or something like that. But the roof gardens, I don't know if you know, but the green roof on Mitchell Park has been really tough to maintain. They're very complicated, very expensive to maintain. So that is one feature that we're shying away from right now. But everything else, once everything is established, folks are adequately trained to maintain it, then it's not necessarily harder to maintain than any other asset that we have, and probably easier and cheaper to maintain than a traditional storm drain system.
Okay, so forgive me, you just sparked a follow-up. out of curiosity, again, green roofs seem like a great thing, right? What's the difficulty and why'd them move away from them?
Well, you know, there's a limited amount of soil. The type of plants that can live up there, sometimes it's tough to get them established. You have to run irrigation up there. Sometimes it can, be a lot of energy cost to run the irrigation up there. If something goes wrong with the irrigation, it can be more expensive to fix. We had an issue with a lot of agricultural bugs on the Mitchell Park roof. I don't think they ever figured out where that came from. Yes, in general, and there's some places like the city of Chicago that has big green roof programs, and it obviously makes a big difference reducing climate change impacts as well. I think we just need to learn more in the Bay Area, at least for city projects. It's being done by big private companies, but at the municipal level, we haven't figured out how to do it a little bit cheaper. It costs a few thousand a month to maintain right now, the one on Mitchell Park.
Jeff?
Thank you for the presentation. Getting some education on this is very welcome and useful. The first question I have is, what is the requirement or impact regarding private properties, or is there any requirement in both business and residential?
Well, it just so happens, because we're updating our stormwater Muni code, we are proposing an update that that all properties, well, let me back up and provide a little bit of background. Properties that are new or redeveloped that create at least 10,000 square feet of impervious surface have to have stormwater treatment on site. That's relatively common. That's, for example, the size of Mitchell Park or something like that. The Fire Station 3 met that requirement. Now, between 2,500 and 10,000 square feet impervious surface, there has to be something called low impact development. So it's basically site design, like I mentioned before, whether catching roof runoff, catching it in a cistern, putting it to landscaping, using pervious pavement, but it's relatively it's smaller scale, and doesn't fit an engineering design like the GSI features. So what we're doing is we are changing that requirement so that basically any project that gets developed or redeveloped has to do that. So, which means they'd have to capture the roof runoff, or use pervious pavement, or use a cistern, whatever they wanted. There's basically design their site as much as possible to reduce impervious surface and then capture that that stormwater runoff on site. And so we are proposing that as part of our Muni Code update. Now, as part of the GSI plan, we're mentioning some ideas and some incentives. We're hoping to get our plan accepted, meet the permit requirement deadline, and then dig in a little further into private projects. And part of that is somewhat related to our funding options, because if we require GSI at a project that is lot line to lot line, and they have no room to put in a bioretention area, perhaps they could pay a fee that goes into a fund that helps to fund public GSI in a street, for example. Or maybe they're going to put bioretention on their sidewalk for their parking lot, but maybe we come up with a compromise so that they put it on the street and they capture some of the street runoff and the parking lot runoff. These are just ideas, and we're not requiring anything through the GSI plan, because we do also need to meet the permit requirement, and we don't want to get, caught in too much negotiations.
So that's phase 2. So you can tell our staff is very excited about the next phase And that's part of what Pam had alluded to, that we need to get a consultant help on with funding strategy. So these are some of the brainstorming ideas. We welcome your ideas as well. We'll have to come back to you guys when we get a better sense of what phase 2 is about, of how we fund all these projects.
So there will be guidelines for business development with the larger acreage, and so presumably you're working in conjunction with the Planning and Transportation Department to get these code changes put in for the permitting process. But as far as the average 5,000 to 7,000 square foot residential lot, minimal impact, some guidelines and recommendations that people can help with, but moving further, you're planning to add enforcement authority. Will there be an enforcement that will be impacting residents?
Perhaps, but our team is very involved in plan review, and so what we try to do is identify opportunities or even requirements that have to be met during the plan review stage, and then we talk to a lot of architects on the phone about how to meet those requirements, and so we haven't run into any issues in terms of site design enforcement. Between the 5,000 and 7,000 is going to be that requirement in the Muni Code update to have to keep the runoff on site.
But that I'm talking about lot size as opposed to impervious. So you're talking about if there's asphalt or cement covering 5,000 to 7,000, or
That's correct.
2,500, which wouldn't be likely the case.
Well,
maybe the case.
Well, we are trying to update our ordinance code, so when someone does a remodel on their house, that they are taking those downspouts and not just hard piping them into the street. They have to be captured or to irrigate your property. So there are some things that we're proposing in this code update that would actually impact some residents, but it's not going to be a huge impact. It's just a more greener, sustainable design, which when you're redeveloping or remodeling your home, that's your ultimate goal.
I support the concept and the end goals here. Switching gears a bit, have you considered some type of neighborhood champion program for the neighborhood GSI features? So you have some planting areas, you have someone who lives nearby or a guy who likes to walk the neighborhood and have some sort of a direct vetted communication line to staff regarding maintenance needs.
We have thought about working with maybe a local nonprofit that could help us perhaps maintain some features and then build a volunteer base that could help us and be, like you said, like a champion. And our zero waste group has zero waste champions throughout neighborhoods, and so perhaps that could overlap, help us keep track. Even if they see a broken irrigation line, they would have an appropriate contact number. If they could help us weed, if they could help us let us know about different things that, there was, in the Southgate neighborhood, there was a car that had parked into a bioretention area, so we were notified about that. So, yes, I think that's a great idea, and we are hoping to do that.
And there's the neighborhood preparedness groups that are already spread out amongst the community that might be worth tapping into as well.
Okay.
Thank you. So you have goals to improve outreach, and I'm wondering, is the goal of the outreach feedback, or is it to push acceptance, or how do you straddle that line?
Well, the general outreach effort would be more about acceptance of the general concept. Every time there's a GSI project, it would go through the regular public review process and go to council, go to the ARB, so there would be an opportunity for feedback as well.
And I'm asking kind of with an eye to what happened to Bull Park, where there was a proposal for both the underwater tanks and the bioswales, and my impression is the bioswales idea was generally met with positive feedback, and the underwater tank not so much. And so is this a good precedent that if the community is up in arms about something, we're trying not to push forward with this, or it kind of depends what it is? And I know it's a difficult question to ask or to answer in the generalization.
So So this is where sometimes we're stuck as staff. Do we share a very high-level concept before it's vetted, before we've had opportunity to gone to the community? So we learn as we move forward, and unfortunately this one we learned because it was in the stormwater resource plan. We wanted to put in all the high-level concepts just because the way that we look at it, if it was in the stormwater resource plan within the county, then we potentially could get grant money. If it was not included in the stormwater resource plan, then we, in the future, could not get grant money. And so we had talked about it at our Stormwater Oversight Committee meeting. The members there were very excited by this, and they wanted to share it with Bull-Park members. Would we have done it in that manner probably in the future? No, we probably would wait, say, okay, we know you're excited by this, so we actually need to have a public meeting. We're not there yet. And we try to slow down the process, but it's when people are excited and we have community members that are excited, then we kind of got stuck. So would we do that differently in the future? Yes.
And part of the reason I'm asking is how can we as a commission assist with that? And in this particular case, as soon as the Bull Park plan was released, residents of Bull Park area contacted me as part of the Parks and Rec Commission. What do you know about this? Oh, nothing. And contact staff and.
Well, and as I said before, that it was very, very concept level, and they thought that we'd already decided on it, which we hadn't. We hadn't even gone through a full vetting process. So that is where we'll go back. If right now Bull Park's actually not high on the list for projects based on the ranking that Pam and her team have done. So we spent a lot of time on something that actually is not ranked pretty high. So, but yes, we've learned some communities, the way that marketing and how you express the information and how it's been tweaked too, it can be a challenge. So.
Okay. And depending on the development path of this, we may want to consider an ad hoc within the Parks and Rec Commission to help assist you.
Well, and obviously, if we're at a level where we were really fleshing it out and bringing it out to the community, we'd be coming to you, and you'd be invited to any public meeting that we had. So it was a very high-level concept that our Stormwater Oversight Committee were very excited about, and it made our lives a little bit more challenging than we anticipated.
And just one final question. You mentioned some of the master plans will need updating. I'm wondering if the Parks and Recreation master plan will need some updating as well.
I can't remember.
The one we just finished. But,
I think Parks and Rec master plan actually has a line about GSI, but it's not elaborated on. So if it ever did come up for renewal, if I remember correctly, I think we didn't manage to sneak it in. But it's not the level of detail that we'd obviously would like. But, it's one of those things where council still hasn't even accepted this plan yet, so.
Yeah, we did discuss swales and other water retention issues in parks and said that that was best guidelines.
Yeah.
thank you.
So thank you for your presentation, and I want to say the same as Jeff just said. I'm very enthusiastic about the goals and ambitions and the fundamental idea of what you're trying to do. I have to say I'm probably not as enthusiastic as everybody else here is about the work that you've presented and the status that we're at. Particularly if your timeline, you've been working on this for a year and a half, and you've got 9 months left to go. And frankly, I felt in the presentation there was a lot of, we're thinking about that. Whereas I would have thought at this particular point, because this is the only time on your timeline that you're going to present to us, that you might have been more specific than we're thinking about that. And in fact, I would encourage that before you go all the way back to council, I would like to invite you to come back and give us an updated presentation. I'm not going to ask you to respond to any of my comments, but the one thing that bothers me in particular, there's been an ad hoc that spent time on our CIP numbers recently for the various projects. What I listen to right now, and as we go through those projects, some of them are obviously impacted by this, and I think some of them are not. But I hear 20, 30% impact to any of those projects. Where we've got a number in there right now that says $250,000. I can imagine that if we say, Darren, come back and tell us how much this is going to cost, if you comply to the GSI, he's going to come back with another $75,000 or something. And I think that imposing that kind of funding on Parks and Rec in particular, but at the city in general, without visibility, because that's my concern here, is I don't see that there's visibility of that, and I kind of doubt that in your outreach plan, you're planning on telling the citizens, by the way, this is going to be really, really good for you. You just need to know it's going to cost the city another $20 million or something. Because by the time you do these projects, and then you've mentioned it over and over again, the maintenance issue, because that's what, when we look at our CIP projects, we've got 10%, 20% of the money at most left over to do something new. Everything else is maintenance. And so I'm kind of worried by the funding implications of this. I understand that it's some outside body outside the city who said we have to do this, so we have to do this. But I'd really like to hear more about where's the money coming from. Are we going to go to the federal government and they're going to give us money? Are we going to go to the state? Are we going to go to our citizens and ask and do a bond measure to fund this? I think the important part of all this is not necessarily the implementation, it's what the standards are. And I think you've confused me relative to whether the standards apply to the projects that we do, the commercial projects or residential projects, and how all that comes. And I'm not comfortable that you've got a good definition of that. The fact that we've done some GSI projects and we haven't bothered to measure them, and so we have no idea of, are we doing anything useful? We're going to spend all this money, we're going to do all this effort, and we have no idea. And this is something where, it was commented, our parks plan was completed last year. And there was something about swales, but there wasn't anything big about this. And in that GSI was not a whole chapter or whatever. Now, a year later, we're going to spend millions of dollars to implement GSI, even though it wasn't on the horizon before. Bothers me. I also see that as you go through this, your plan doesn't call out a step where consultants get involved, but as I heard it, I think there's 4 different places where you're going to invite consultants in. And I wonder if at some point, something like this, and I've asked this question within our own CIP, whether there's knowledge that we like to build ourselves rather than simply contracting out, and the consultant builds the knowledge and gets to use that knowledge to go sell the same information to Mountain View or whatever else, that maybe some of these things are not consultant-rich projects as opposed to in-house public works projects. The other thing the last thing I would comment on is specific in a specific level. You talked about in lots of these projects, the trees are going to be there anyway, and so this is good for the trees because we're going to capture the water for the trees, which are going to be there anyway. I would have been interested in the list of 5 things that you have on the front page of the document we were given, if there was a number 6, which is that you weren't just going to deal with what was there, that was going to be there anyway, but that was habitat that was deliberately being built. I continually worry, they took down the trees in front of my house because they had elm disease, and 2 years later they replaced them. I worry that the city cares about trees. Take a survey and ask people, what do you care? Why do you like Palo Alto? Oh, we love our trees. And I see nothing in here that says you're going to do anything about that. You're going to help the trees that might coincidentally be there. And the picture you showed of Arastadero had trees in it, but I didn't see anything in your writing or your conversation that explicitly called out that, you were going to put in some plants or whatever, but plants that are contributing to the things that people like in the city, which is the trees that are part of it. So a bit of a rant, but I would encourage you to come back and give us an update, if nothing else, to practice on us before you go to council. So thank you for your time and the effort you're putting into this. As I said, the goals are correct. So thank you.
Thank you.
Corinne, you're willing to stay?
Sure. Well, you know, to be honest, we actually really appreciate your feedback because we've been, as you saw, spending a lot of time on this. And actually, our city staff is doing a good chunk of the work because we don't actually have a lot of money for consultant support. So we do value all of your input. And as it is still an 85%, we're not done yet. So it's a little challenging when you're coming to give an update and when we don't even have the completed 85%, but we want to keep on moving on with our schedule. So we do appreciate your input, and yes, the funding is a huge issue, and we know CIPs, our CIPs too, are just because of construction and getting people to do work in Palo Alto is a challenge. So
As a citizen, as opposed to a commission chair, I might write you the rest of my notes.
that would be great. I would greatly appreciate it. So.
Would you like to talk to us about the horizontal levee conceptual plan?
Sure. So this is we're switching gears a little bit. So we actually went to council about sea level rise discussion, a study session, I think 3 years ago. My staff, Julie Weiss, is actually working in partnership with the Office of Sustainability Sea Level Rise policy and a plan they're currently developing. But in conjunction with this, there are a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement about these horizontal levees. So that was actually discussed at the city council at the study session, and then we're just going to give you an update on what's going on. So currently our existing levees actually in Palo Alto are not FEMA rated. They're not the FEMA accreditation standards. We're looking at through SAFER, which is another project that I don't know if Public Works has been here to discuss SAFER with you guys. So that there's a SAFER feasibility report that's not done yet, which is probably why they have not come to talk to you. So hopefully in early 2019, we can come back to you to talk about the SAFER and then also our sea level rise policy and plan development. We're trying to meld all these together. So just so you know what the horizontal levee is, it's rather than building the levees higher, they're building them longer. So it helps with waves, it helps actually accrete, so the sediment will actually build up. It will give our salt marsh harvest mice and clapper rails somewhere to go. Right now in the king tide, they go to the levee and then they're basically free picking. That's what all the naturalists come. They say Palo Alto is the prime example of how you don't want to have your levee system work with our king tides. So it helps with flood management. And then also for us, since it's right next to the wastewater treatment plant, you can utilize the wastewater treatment plant effluent to provide that freshwater habitat, which is uplands, which is a nice benefit. So this kind of gives you an example of what the horizontal levee system looks like. It's a much longer, so your eye can see it, and it's not where your traditional levee where it's just a big wall, which we don't really want to see. And that's what we've seen in some of the preliminary SAFER alignments for levees is some of the options are we can have really big walls to protect our community, and so we're trying to see if there's other options out there. So we were lucky, we were approached through across the bay at Oraloma Sanitary District. They actually have a test bed horizontal levee system, and so they actually got some money, and so we were asked if we wanted to be another concept area for horizontal levee, and Darren and I said absolutely, why not? Free money and a free concept, great, we're not going to say no to that. So this was a collaboration with the Environmental Sciences Associates and San Francisco Estuary Institute, and SFEI does phenomenal research throughout the entire Bay Area. We actually, as a wastewater treatment plant and stormwater, we fund them, but this is another research project that they do. So they evaluated 7 sites within our community, and we vetted some of those, looked at them, and we decided actually let's just go for the 3. This is still high-level concept. We haven't, just like Bull Park, we haven't made any decisions yet. So we picked the 3 sites because of the proximity to the wastewater treatment plant, obviously our water availability, because putting pipes in grounds, as we were alluding to earlier with the recycled water pipelines, putting pipes in grounds is really expensive. Trying to tie it in with our SAFER project as well. And then the con is also tying it in with our SAFER project, because no one wants to have a levy. Everyone likes to have control over it, so we're trying to tie it in the timing wise. So the SAFER, hopefully by 2019, and then we can get this integrated more. So this is our Embarcadero conceptual design. So this area is essentially the airport, where you can see my airport parking lot. So it's the widest part when you're walking out there. So it's right now the habitat's not that great. So that's part of the reason why it ranked higher. So this would be our phase 1, is the area that's poor habitat, wider zone, so we're not impacting our existing salt marsh. We would be potentially one of the first ones to actually get a horizontal levee into an open waterway. So right now, keep in mind, it took them, I think, 3 to 5 years to permit the conceptual levee design. Not the conceptual, but the test bed one in Orloma that actually doesn't even discharge out into the bay. So this is still fun and new and exciting. The second phase is, if it works well, would be the build out would be along this portion, which is right in front of our wastewater treatment plant, and then right in front of the environmental volunteers, and the up towards where the ranger station is. So that's the other second portion. So this gives you a little bit better sense in terms of this space needed. So think about the slope as a very shallow slope. And that's why you need more space for it. As you can see, this is the Embarcadero Road, and this is where the new SAFER levee would actually, the top would be, and then we could have all this great habitat, utilizing our fresh water from our effluent, and then providing this brackish marsh that could provide refuge for the salt marsh harvest mouse and the clapper rail, bridgeway rail, sorry, they changed their name. So this gives you a sense in terms of the slope and the gradients. This is just another view of it. So we can have kind of a riparian corridor, walking trails. So this is just very high level concept. So this is the 2018 construction costs and the 2021 construction costs. So obviously that's why we're looking at just doing phase 1 first, to see how long it's going to take to get built. And yes, the escalation in costs between, is that what you're pointing to, 2018 to 2021? And yes, the 35% contingency, because this is very, very high level concept that we haven't done any design engineering work at all. And the nice thing is we actually do have some funding to do some more this is really high level concept, but to actually get more of a conceptual design done. So we're continuing to partner with us at San Francisco Estuary Partnership. We actually, we're gonna get a 30% preliminary design, and then we'll come back to you guys. And we actually have some funding through the US EPA Climate Ready Estuaries, and then we're trying to see if we can find some other funding for the remainder of these project phases. So the nice thing is with Measure AA and about anything that has to do with the baylands, finding outside funding is actually feasible, and you need to have a shovel-ready concept. So we're trying to do 30%, and then also think about all the permitting requirements, since it is changing an area that's adjacent to an existing salt marsh, which will be very challenging permitting-wise. But we're always up for a challenge. So that's the horizontal levee discussion. I'm here in the hot seat again for the Rensselaer Marsh after this, so keep on going.
Jeff, do you have any comments?
Could you repeat what SAFER stands for, please?
Do you know
Sorry, not trying to put you on the spot.
SAFER?
I got.
I know, it's in on
strategy to advance flood protection, and then you.
Strategy, thank you. We've always called it SAFER. Okay, strategy to advance flood protection, ecosystems, and recreation. So this was in partnership with the San Francisco Creek JPA, and HDR is the consultant working on it. And currently, before Redwood City and North and East Palo Alto had already done a feasibility study on SAFER. Mountain View's also done a feasibility study for sea level rise, and Palo Alto had not. So a few years back, we actually decided to throw in some more money so we could make sure we bridge it, because it doesn't make sense to have people in the north and the people to the south and us in the middle and not have a plan. So that was the strategy. So that's why it's called SAFER, because it's linking it with the people to the north.
Thank you. And could you say a little bit more about why the 3 choices out of 7 were moved forward and 4 of the original options were no longer considered? What was?
Sure. Well, some of it had to do with logistics and location. So in the report, you actually will see that they had some on the other side of the duck pond, which really we don't need on the adjacent side of the duck pond. Some were down in Mountain View with basically benefiting their area, but we don't actually have, our effluent pipeline doesn't go down there, so it'd be a challenge to get our putting pipes in the ground costs quite a bit of money. We do have recycled water that goes there, but we don't have effluent, and we don't have recycled water that goes in enough volume that would be needed. So that's why we targeted just the areas where we thought would benefit Palo Alto specifically.
You said that we have recycled water, but not effluent?
So recycled water actually goes through another treatment process and has a chlorine residual, and that goes down to Mountain View and irrigates a lot of the shoreline amphitheater. But treated effluent actually does not have chlorine residual, so you have to actually remove the chlorine before you discharge it into the bay.
Oh, okay.
So it just makes it a little bit more challenging. So that is Title 22 recycled water versus treated effluent, which is what we're proposing to use in these habitat.
Thank you.
Karin, can I borrow the
Yes.
yeah, if we can go to slide 8.
Yes.
Let's see. One other one I wanted to point out on this is one reason I was really excited is the Baylands Master Plan, which was last updated in 2008, had recommended several sites for restoration that had been filled, much like Harbor Point was done in the 80s and 90s. It is all fill, it was all parking lot, much like this spot over here that we're talking about. All the way up to the pathway and beyond is all fill. I've pulled out chimneys from there. I heard rumor that it was fill from the earthquake from San Francisco, and all sorts of strange things. So the habitat value in that spot is very, very poor. It was already delineated as a site for restoration through the Baylands Master Plan. And I thought it could be just a fabulous spot for restoration to involve volunteers and fix that properly.
Great.
Sure.
Ryan, do you have any comments?
Yeah, could you go to the slide that has the cross-section showing the levee?
That one?
Yeah, so what is the top of the levee? If someone is looking at it, is that exposed? What is the material?
We don't know at this point in time what that material would be. That would all be when we do the design. So this is still a concept level. It can be however we want. Currently, the levee in front of the wastewater treatment plant is actually the road. So
Right.
that's the current levee.
Right.
But in other areas, it's the typical, the actual path that you would see is top of the levee. So that's something that we would actually, as a community, just determine how we want it designed.
And could it be organic materials rather than?
Absolutely, yeah. It just happens that right now, our road is the levee, but everywhere else is organic materials.
Okay. And what's the approximate width of the levee that's exposed there so that it's not part of the wetlands?
I think it's a typical 8 to 10 feet,
Okay.
which is standard for most of our
Pathways.
Right.
Right.
I think in the Baylands, you're actually a little bit, some of them are not as,
Yes, some very wide, some more narrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so big picture, appreciating the very good intentions behind the project generally and the concept. What is the risk of unintentional degradation of the existing wetlands, right? To construct these, I imagine you're going to disrupt the existing habitat pretty significantly. And how do you both kind of, abate those disruption issues and then ensure that it actually works long-term?
so I would say that for the construction, obviously, we would have to avoid birding season. We would need to be putting in any kind of protection measures. Our goal is to construct the area that's already impacted, not touch the actual wetland area. And so I'm only anticipating, because I don't actually know yet, but we'd probably put a band in where we wouldn't touch it, and then we would let that naturally evolve over time. But obviously, we would need to, that's the challenge. This is why we're picking phase one, where it's the widest area that we could actually make an impact to. So I think that currently, if you look at the habitat that's there along the edge, it's actually not great habitat for the current species that are there. So if we could actually create a buffering zone where it is a brackish marsh, that actually would benefit them. And so we would hopefully, I think, allow time, and that's where the biologists and the experts would come in.
And so is this kind of something that you think you can design in the first instance and get it right, or is this more or less a trial and error sort of thing?
So that's part of the reason why they have this. I would actually urge you guys, and maybe Darren can help facilitate this, to go to Oraloma and see their test bed. So they actually have, I think it's 20 different cells. And so they've tried different planting schemes, and so they can know, and it was a partnership with Save the Bay, so they actually did the planting. And so now they know which soil structure, just like what Pam was talking about, what the soil structure works, what's the planting, what's the densities, what's the water quality coming back out. And so this is why it took so long to get the permitting done, because then they anticipate that this is what they would like to see all future levees doing this, basically integrating into having a brackish marsh. And so you'll see down in, I believe it's Alviso area, they're going to do an ecotone levee, which is different than a horizontal levee because it's using fresh water to create that ecotone, and the horizontal levee is using wastewater or treated effluent. So that's a different delineation. And so we will actually see some ecotones being built prior to this even going through permitting and getting built. So there'll be a lot of lessons learned, is what I'm trying to say, before Palo Alto gets. And then it's usually the same select consultants that have done all the different locations, and it is what you said, but they are the specialists, and they know. And this is the one at Oraloma is studied by Stanford and also Berkeley heavily. So there's been a lot of research on that side of it too.
Okay, so last question. What would you anticipate would be the timeline from construction through when you actually have a habitat that you think is kind of mature in the area that you're looking to remediate?
From today?
Are we talking about one season from when the construction happens? Are we talking about 2 or 3 seasons?
No, I don't know the answer to that right now. So that would have to be built into when we do 30% design. So hopefully some of those questions can be answered. Then when we get to the next stage, then we would need to see how long does it take for basically nature to, that band area that we're not going to touch, how long does it actually take to adapt over time? And we know that it can be fairly quick, but we also know that it can take time. So, okay. And we're trying to plan out too, because eventually that whole area, that salt marsh, the way that with sea level rise, it can completely get inundated, and we will have no marsh at all. So we're trying to see if we can figure out a solution in the interim to give the salt marsh harvest house and the ridgeway whale somewhere to go.
Got it. And forgive me, I said that was my last question, but I actually have one other. Appreciating that this is viewed as being the best option, what are the alternatives?
A big wall.
So
raising that wall, raising the road in front of the plant significantly higher, just keep on adding concrete and having no shoreline. I mean, that's potentially one option. What if sea level rise is really projected to rise? I mean, I have a feeling it will not be during my time on this planet, but maybe my kids or my grandkids. But yeah, we're trying to see if we can provide opportunities for the best option in the future. And the nice thing about Palo Alto is we have, as Darren was alluding to, we have this strip of land that was already in the Baylands Master Plan to be basically improved upon. And this could be a good test case to see how well these horizontal levees work. We're not talking about the entire area, we're just talking about one small phase of currently not great habitat right in front of an airport that we could see if we could improve. So and let me tell you, the regulatory it's probably gonna take me 5-6 years to get through regulations on this, just to get approval.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, or longer. It could be 10 years. I mean, this could be really my, that's my project that I see through till my end of my career. I don't know. So, yeah.
I'm sure. So one very brief comment, then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
I'm always concerned about impact to users. And so as you go through the process and you start thinking about ways in which you might stage this in order to, accomplish this, it's obviously a long-range plan, right?
Yeah.
But to try and be very mindful, we're talking presumably about big earth-moving equipment needing to be in the Baylands. And, the disruptive nature of that, not even just that one area, but perhaps everything that, would be accessed from that area on. And so I don't know how you would go about doing it efficiently without, using big earth-moving equipment, but to think about ways in which you can try to reduce the impact to users in real time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll leave that one up to Darren.
I'm a little confused about how this is constructed. That treatment area, well, I guess big picture. In the write-up, it was talking about how some of it was reclaimed dirt or sediment from flood control channels, and some of it was also saying natural sediment. So how much of this that we see in this diagram on slide 9 do we put down, and how much does nature put down?
So the initial construction, I don't actually have all the, because since this is still conceptual level, so we might actually have a little bit more idea in terms of volume of sediment being moved during the 30%. So we'd obviously need to be building up some of it, and then the goal is the levee portion of it closest to the road.
Okay.
But then the goal is that over time that the bay would actually naturally accrete. So we know down the lower South Bay that sedimentation and the current salt ponds that are getting converted, they're actually naturally accreting. So soil is actually building up in the margins. So we're trying to set it up so that way we can continue that pattern. So it's less imported soil and local.
And so what is the treatment area? What does that mean then?
So the treatment area is just essentially where in the initial area of imagine the pipe, essentially with a diffuser underground for our treated effluent. It would be a slow level, and that's what they call treatment. Our water is already discharged. It's a shallow,
So on this diagram, this is a pipe that's going underground and providing water.
Providing water to this area.
It's like effectively drip irrigation.
Essentially drip irrigation, but it's subsurface drip irrigation.
Okay.
A little bit different than what you would be thinking about. And so it's basically trying to create a brackish marsh, utilizing our treated effluent, which we already do if you think about our effluent channel, you know that we have alkali bulrush, and near our the man-made effluent channel adjacent to the airport. We've been monitoring how we have changed the habitat there over time. So that's part of my group's team, is looking at that over time, that we know we have freshwater marsh, we also know we have brackish marsh, and the alkali bulrush has outcompeted some of the salt marsh plants there, the pickleweed. So we would anticipate we'd have some similar habitat gradient change, but this one would actually be on purpose versus happen.
Okay, and so everything to the right here then would be accumulated sediment that just nature deposits.
That's the anticipation, that this area would be accumulated sediment.
And when we look at these different spots around the bay, are there different spots where we think more sediment will accumulate, or are they all roughly the same?
I would need to check on my sediment expert at SFEI, because I don't actually know that question.
Okay.
What my understanding is, in the lower South Bay currently, it's all along the margins, it's accumulating, but I'm sure there's certain areas where they accumulates faster than others, but I just don't know that.
Now, I mean, how much does, I like the idea of this horizontal levee, but how much does it really help the flood control? It seems very good habitat, but this is more of a habitat program really than a flood control.
Well, it's a combination, because in the same area, so you think about this entire levee, it's a long levee, and that same reach, you'd actually, if you did the traditional levee, you'd have to make it really tall. So it's aesthetically
I can see if
pleasing.
we're having breaking waves, that would make a lot of sense, but really we're more like a bathtub there. When the
Correct.
bathtub just rise up, and what really matters is the height of that final.
But over time, as that bathtub's rising up, you're creating sediment and you're also getting plants built up. So essentially that levee is naturally building itself up over time. Whereas if you just do the traditional levee, that's the height it's going to be, and it's not really going to be able to have the opportunity to build up any sediment in front of it.
We think that sediment will go up eventually higher than that big berm in the middle there, the highest point. We think that the natural sediment will go above that.
No, but it helps. So think about when we have our king tides events. So, and eventually we are going to have storm surges down in the lower South Bay. I know you think about it, San Francisco currently, when they have a storm surge, it actually goes over their waterfront area. So we're trying to make it so we do have a habitat refuge area as well as our existing levee. If we were not to build this long levee, then this levee system would have to be taller.
I could see it would have to be taller for habitat purposes, but just if you're trying to keep the water to the right and dry to the left, or I guess vice versa here. No. Water to the right, dry to the left. Won't that just be keeping the top of that berm higher than the water?
So according to all the folks that have been researching this for the horizontal levee plans, that over time, because obviously the sea level rise happens over decades, that the soil would naturally accrete over those decades. The plants, detritus, when they break down, would also build that area up. And so you would essentially slow down how fast that levee would need to be built. So the plan is, if this breaks down and all of a sudden the water's here, then this levee is going to have to be built faster, taller. So the safer plan is to build the levee, the base, so you can keep on adding on top of it. Our goal is to not have to keep on adding on top of it, right?
Okay. So these safer levees, are they going to be like Bixby where you can't plant anything on them, or can we have plantings on the side?
So the safer ones that are still in the feasibility, which,
Yeah. Okay. So Bixby Park,
yes.
we have this big barren area and we can't really plant much on it just because we're worried about the ruts.
Well, that's because it's on a landfill.
Yeah.
So that's
And
different. This is not going to be a landfill.
But even on the existing levees, we're limited to what we can plant. We can't plant trees by the edge of a levee right now, flood control levee.
Correct.
So with this levee, the safer levee that you're showing there, would we have the same constraints in that you wouldn't be able to plant trees on top of that?
On top, yes, but in front of where we're, that transitional zone, we could be planting.
Okay, so but where the people are walking, they're going to be walking on a barren area there.
They'd be walking on a trail.
On a trail, but there's, and all the vegetation, they're going to be just this little elevated spot of gravel that goes across everything, and they're going to be sitting above all this vegetation below them.
Yes.
Oh, I hate that. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, that's how levees are, right? So we're trying to, how do you get a levee?
Yeah.
How do you incorporate habitat and a levee at the same time? And that's what we're trying to come up with a solution. So levees are levees. We have to protect from sea level rise.
Yeah, I understand.
Corinne, is there a horizontal levee research papers or documentation or
Yes.
whatever? I would encourage that rather than continuing that conversation here, we make that available to the commissions, and then maybe we can come back with more educated or understanding questions after we've seen that. Would that make sense, Keith?
I'm happy right now anyway. but-
Jeff?
Okay.
Just a couple of quick questions. One is, what's the current build time on these? Like how quickly are they able to construct these levees, like per, I don't know how they measure it, square foot or cubic foot or whatever? What's the
So
build time?
currently, there are no true horizontal levees that face the open water that have been built to date. There will be an ecotone levee, and I don't know the build time on that yet, but I can get that information for you, by Alviso. And I think they just got a project funding approved, and I think they're almost through all their permitting. So we don't have that data yet.
And then how would our city fund something like this? Do we have a fund that deals with sea level rise, or what's the funding source?
Great question. So no, we actually don't have a fund that deals with sea level rise. The SAFER feasibility project funds came out of Public Works General Fund. This work that we're currently doing on the horizontal levee was all through grant money, and we're actually trying to look up for more grant money. So that's also on the timing of it. How long is it going to take? It's actually really looking for funding sources. And the staff is doing this in kind. So because it's interesting and we like a challenge, and we know that it's good for the environment. We like to protect our plant. That's why we're doing it.
And I assume it's eventually going to be needed, correct?
Correct.
Levies.
And so as I mentioned earlier, I currently have a staff person, Julie Weiss, working with our Office of Sustainability to develop a sea level rise policy and then eventually a plan. And so they're, in 2019, planning on coming to you and then also to council. So we're busy.
Great. Thank you so much for all of your work. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So Karen, thank you very, very much. I want to make a few comments. One is I very, very much appreciate the really advanced transparency of what you're doing here. I think I've even talked to you about sometimes that Public Works sort of surprises us with, or we even find out after it's done.
Well, that's why we're trying to come to you early and often.
And that's exactly what I want to recognize, that I understand that you're doing that, and it's unfair. Some of the questions we're asking are totally unfair, considering the advanced transparency you're giving us, and so thank you for that. I think that my only comments would be same as before relative to measurement, and same as the BioBlitz that was planned and is now delayed relative to Bixby and the artwork up there. I don't know how you do a BioBlitz out in the marsh right now, but at some point you're going to want to measure, is this better or not better or whatever relative to the habitat? Hopefully you don't have to measure, is it going to work relative to flooding, but that's an issue too. But let's as early as we can identify what the measurement is or how we're going to measure or whatever. My other comment would be that the work is going on the boardwalk right now, as Darren mentioned. I would encourage, if the commission members haven't been out to see that, you should go see it, because it would help you understand how, in fact, you could build something like this, and not necessarily totally destroy what's already there, the way they're going about it, and I was there the day they actually sunk one of their tractors into the bay, and how do you mitigate that, and so on. The other thing to consider that I would be interested in, you had two numbers up there, 1.4 million and 1.6 million in 2 different years or whatever. But once again, I would say, and by the way, what's the maintenance cost after the fact? And I would sure like to see that when you come back. And I think the other thing is to remind the commission is that this is not preservation of the Baylands any more than Bixby Park is restoration, or is preservation of what we have there, because it's all restoration. And what you're trying to do is rescue something that was severely damaged at one point and then sort of filled in without necessarily the appropriate conservation approach. It was just filled in and you can see, when walking along there, you can see some of the stuff that's in there. My last point would be, I've already heard from environmental volunteers some question. I don't know if you've met with them or they had lunch with somebody from Public Works or something that told them about this. I would encourage us to go to the board, or maybe you could train me and give me these slides, and because I'm on the board, but I think making sure that there's sort of expectations set, that they're not thinking this is going to happen in front of their building in March or something, but I would encourage that we deliberately do that, since they're they are, as Ryan said, worrying about the users. They're there. So again, thank you. I think it's great that you're here with this.
Great points. And yes, it's still very high level, concept level. We're not even anywhere near construction. We're not even at a 30% design. So it's just, so you guys don't get surprised when we come back with 30%, you didn't tell us about it. So we're learning our lessons here. Early and often, right? You guys love hearing us talk. Okay, so the
Now
next.
I'd like to introduce Karen.
It's Karen, by the way.
Karen, sorry, thank you.
All right, let's see. Okay, so I think this is my third time here about the Rensselaer Marsh. Did I get that right?
At least 3.
At least 3. So who's been out there lately or driven past it? It looks dramatically different, correct? Okay, so we're getting close. So in terms of the maintenance improvements, so we've excavated all of the accumulated sediment, and we created that new island in the top. And partly because the reason why we created the island is we don't have the money to dispose of the soil. So we found an interim solution, and we created a habitat island, because we just have to make things up as we go, because otherwise we would have to let the pond be dry for longer and then excavate the soil. So we figured this was a better solution at this point in time. We've removed all that overgrown vegetation. We did leave some cattails in the northern portion of the marsh so that they can grow back as soon as water is put back in. So we assume that over time it will turn back into a marsh habitat. We have now a north end and a south end with a berm in between, with a spillway and with pipes, if you guys have seen those. So they're in already. The berm around is complete, and the actual berm in between the 2 ponds is also complete. So that's all done. So thank Frank and Elise and team with Public Works, because they did a phenomenal job of getting that done. And thankfully we had a soil broker, so the soil didn't cost us any money. So that's actually why we need to do it now. We're currently still trying to repair this inlet and outlet piping, which is why we don't have any water in it. And that's due to, we've selected the consultant, we're just trying to get the contract signed. So this gives you, doesn't want to work. There we go. So this is our soil stockpile area. This will be a big moat. So we're excited to see, we've seeded it. So we're excited, and now that it's rained, so we'll see what grows. We actually can see some little green stuff coming up, which is great. We've, the whole perimeter has been seeded as well of the berm, so that should also eventually grow in with native grasses, which is exciting. So we're hoping to transition it from a construction site to back to a habitat. As you can see, this will be the cattail area, and then this will be the deeper pond. So this is what it currently looks like. They put the juke netting in and then they hydro-seeded it, and that's partly just for stormwater protection. Since I also wear the stormwater compliance hat, we wanted to make sure we were in compliance with our stormwater. So we have, the island is still there, so we didn't take that out. But the nice thing is this is a great maintenance trail that we can get around and drive a vehicle. So we can actually maintain it, so we won't have the berm that you couldn't literally walk around without twisting your ankle, which is what we currently had after 25 years of deferred maintenance. So this is, you can see this is the pipes with the spillway here. This is another island. And then down here, there's a little dip. So if the water gets really, really high, there's another spillway. So, whoops. And then this is just another view. It's really hard to capture the images. I have a lot of photos on my iPhone, but they weren't always that great. So, and then we just had, we're working on, so we had 3 bids. We actually did select a consultant already as a contractor to do this inlet and outlet piping. We're waiting we have as you may know, that we've lost a lot of staff, and our procurement process is challenging right now, so we're just trying to get a contract signed. And then they actually also, with the rain, are needing to get this done and fast before bird season. So the contractor, with the holidays and with the nesting season, they have essentially about 2 months to get this done. They think they can do it all, so we just met with them on Monday just to kind of get a not an official start, but just to start discussing the project with them. We, so as soon as that's done, we'll have Darren or Kristen give you guys an update, and hopefully you'll see the water in there. So that's the goal, to get that water in as soon as possible. We also are applying for Measure AA grant funding. That's on all of our parcel tax, and that actually helps with improving the habitat around the perimeter of the bay, and to look at our remnant slough and also just the whole Rensselaer Marsh and see if we can improve the whole Rensselaer wetland, not just the freshwater portion of it, just see if we can improve the hydraulics in there. And so that is basically in alignment with the Baylands Conservation Comprehensive Plan. I think that's the last slide. All right, you got more questions for me? I love you guys' questions. The Rensselaer Marsh is almost done. So excited about that.
Jeff, any questions? Keith?
When we start filling this, we throw water in this side, but then also some of the fresh water is put over by the golf course. And how do we select how much water we flow through this marsh?
So this marsh was built in 1991, and it can between 1 to 3 million gallons of water per day is what it's already allocated for. So we're not taking any water from the golf course. This is actually effluent. So this is our secondary effluent location.
But my understanding is from the water treatment, some of it goes in through the channels by the golf course that we dump
Correct.
up there, and some that we dump over on this side.
How do we decide that?
Yeah, how do we decide
So
how much we pipe
so-
through this pond?
So we decided the volume of water based on the 1992 California Coastal Conservancy grant that actually tied, and I wish I had my other slides, but tied the salt marsh portion, which is right by Bixby Park, that channel, there's an underground pipe, if you remember from, maybe you weren't
Yep.
here, but it's at high tide, the water flows in the salt marsh, and then it flows down, and then it's a pump actually into Matadero Creek. And so because they didn't want to put a lot of salty water into Matadero Creek, we put in this freshwater marsh to help mitigate that. And so it's essentially a 1-to-1 ratio. So right now, it hasn't been getting that fresh water to basically dilute the salt water, but it's a short time period, so we don't anticipate that it's going to cause problems in the flooding basin, because that takes years, as we know from our outfall channel. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay, so it's around 1 to 2 million gallons of water per day.
So we're not looking at the health of the pond, we're just looking at the health of the creek down the stream?
Correct.
Okay.
The health of the pond was an added benefit.
Okay. And we're happy with the flow through it? If we increased it or decreased it, would it change the health, or is it not very sensitive?
Well, it may help in terms of reducing nutrients, because wetlands actually naturally absorb nitrogen. We remove ammonia, but we don't remove nitrogen or phosphorus out of our treatment plant, so it's kind of like a polishing wetland. So that actually would be better if we could divert more flow through there.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jeff?
Could you just clarify, what is the public access to this area once it's completed?
So that actually goes hand in hand with Darren's Baylands Conservation Comprehensive Plan, which you guys have also been part of. Do you want to
Sure,
take that
yeah.
to Sloan?
Yeah, we shared the outcome of our outreach, both the stakeholders and the commission, on the recommendations on where we'd have routing and where we wouldn't. Public Works understands that and is willing to comply. As we've talked about before, and we've done this in other areas, so it can work, but the truth of the matter is, we said we only wanted the marsh side open, and that the road side of that levee that goes around the berm would remain closed as a non-trail. But as you can see from the photos, it looks like a road. It's 15 feet wide, and people are going to walk on it. What we'll do is the same thing we did at Bixby when we didn't want to have every single service road where the maintenance were driving to be a pedestrian trail or bike trail. We put up a sign that said, this is a maintenance trail only, or maintenance service road only, no public access. So we'll do the same there, and Public Works will help facilitate that.
So you'll be able to walk on the marsh side from the south, and then where do you end up on the north side?
It'll connect with the existing road from the ITT area, I believe. Yeah.
So this is something in the Baylands, so we're saying that they can walk along this perimeter.
Right.
The challenge is that we need to actually improve the access here, which is part of the Baylands Conservation Comprehensive Plan, because currently we do have a maintenance bridge that we would not want to encourage residents to be walking along, if you guys have ever been over there. It's basically our outfall pipe with basically a plastic grate over it. So, and the steps down aren't really steps, they're kind of like, you're lucky if you don't slide down on your bottom. So that's another phase 2 for us to see how we can get the trail access, and that's part of the Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan.
So then when this area opens initially, it'll be a dead end for pedestrian access, or?
So currently, when we finish the Runslow Marsh, we will not have trail access at that point in time. It will need to be built into the Bixby Park Baylands Conservation Comprehensive Plan with the trails. And at that point in time, then the trails will be marked and access. Obviously, if someone wanted to walk it, you would come in on the ITT road, and you could actually walk the whole perimeter of it, which we're not encouraging because we're saying that that's not a trail.
And Darren, could you project when we might be able to open this area to general public pedestrian use?
Yeah, I think Karin's right that people will start using it immediately. There already are. So the truth of the matter is the Baylands regulars will continue and are using it. When we publicize it and start adding it to maps, well, probably after the BCCP has been recommended by the commission and adopted by council before we generate a new one, a new trail, form of trail. However, I think that phase 2 piece that Karin's talking about that's currently, well, people hike it, it's a perilous hike. And that one's a conversation with Public Works to see how far away that would be. That could happen sooner rather than later, because they'll need access on that one too. Is that correct, Karin?
Not anymore.
Necessarily? Oh.
It sounds like a safety issue if people are accessing it now.
Yeah.
And we're aware of that.
Yeah. So we'll work on that.
Thank you.
Karin, the only comment I have is to apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier.
No problem. It's been my entire life, so.
And all I can say is congratulations. I think what you've done here this is great.
Oh, thank you.
So forgive me if I could. I just wanted to echo Jeff's comment, which is that I think the sooner you're able to get that trail up and running, the better. Even if it's not quote unquote official.
Yeah.
You know, it's in a state where you think people could actually access it, would be great.
Will do.
The issue from the Baylands plan, there is how much access are you going to allow relative to the habitat that you're creating, and are you wasting a habitat by making it so accessible that animals wouldn't stay there anyway? I think that's the discussion about where should you allow access and where should you not allow access, and I think that's and I would invite commission members to participate in the comprehensive plan. Karin, thank you very much for the marathon session that you've provided us.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to coming for future items, because Sea Level Rise will be probably the next one you'll see me at. So,
This is great.
thanks.
So Peter should be on his way. Yeah, he was in his office, so.
Okay. And I don't think we're any earlier or later than he would have anticipated. I think actually we've done a decent job of being efficient.
I have a general question I could occupy time with. Just wanted to ask regarding talk about regarding the printouts that we get at the meetings. About a year ago, we went away from having the packets sent to us, and now we effectively arrive and have the packet waiting here for us, which seems to be kind of defeating the purpose. I just wanted to check in with the other commissioners and staff and clarify what we would like to have. I mean, I think it's nice perhaps having a printed out agenda. Do we want anything else in terms of materials in front of us when we arrive?
I think maybe Kristen can fill us in, but I think the bottom line there was we said, let's just go to having it sent to us in soft copy, and we don't need to get the hard copy here. The problem with not having hard copy is if we do get visitors the visitors don't have that. And I think they went with, if they're going to make, and you can see there's not hundreds of copies back there, there's 10 copies back there or something. And I think they went with a decision, if they're making 10 copies for the public, they might as well make 7 more to put up here. Kristen, does that make sense?
Well, I know that the commission, you're right, Commissioner Greenfield decided to just go electronic unless a specific commissioner let Natalie know that they wanted a printout. We do need to provide copies for the public, but if the commission prefers not to get the full packet, we can go back to that.
Do we want a quick poll on whether you want the hard copy? Let's just do that, a quick poll.
I'm fine with no hard copy. We're a little limited in
Ryan?
terms of.
I think having a hard copy on the day.
Can you turn your mic on, please?
I think having a hard copy on the days is helpful. Without it, I think I would be lost.
No. In general, I don't think I need it. Where I find it useful is if we have oversized park plans or something like that. Sometimes being able to look at it all in one spot is better. And my printer only goes 8.5 by 11, so I would appreciate oversized printouts, but the other printouts I get online.
If I may, Don, it might be worth taking this offline with the other commission members who aren't here today as well.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to necessarily decide here. That's why I call it a straw poll. Jeff, the question is, do you want hard copies?
I'm fine with electronic copies.
Okay. So we'll complete a complete poll with this got everybody in.
Natalie can send out an email to the commission confirming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super quickly, if I might propose something, it sounds as though everyone, but for me, is happy not to have printed copies. So I'm happy to grab printed copies from the back of the room, which is perfectly fine for me.
Thanks for that, Ryan. So we have Peter joining us again. Peter, welcome.
Good evening.
And we're going to talk about the Cubberley synthetic field.
Yes, Peter Jensen, Landscape Architect for the City of Palo Alto, Public Works Department, here to present just more informational item about two projects. Actually, they're very close to proximity to one another. It's going to seem like one, but they are two different CIP projects. One is the replacement of the synthetic turf at the Cubberley Field and the addition of a restroom facility there. I'm going to go through the presentation fairly quickly. I don't know if we need a lot of detail on this. I think you've all seen the synthetic turf out there. It was installed 2009, 2010 area. It's now to the age that it needs to be replaced, and that's what we are intending to do. The replacement of the field, well, I guess we could talk about the restrooms first too, since that's the actual order of this presentation. The restroom is a new item to the Cubberley Field, does not have one currently existing. Right now, portable restrooms are brought in for that facility, which aren't ideal for the area due to the amount of programming that does happen on the field. You can see in the slide there where we are proposing to put the restroom, which is adjacent to the grandstands there, in between the synthetic field and the baseball field, so there is a full access to all the field amenities out there. I think the biggest impact of putting in the restroom, because right now the location where the restroom is going to be is fairly void of any type of development. It's just kind of an open asphalt and dirt area. The biggest impact will be the trenching of the actual sewer line out to Nelson Way, which will occur either down the pathway or along the pathway. We haven't really mapped that out as how that's going to work. Of course, we will keep the access open along the path to the neighborhood to the south, so Cubberley will remain to be accessible. We're recommending a specific bathroom, an Exelu bathroom. This goes along with the recent prefabricated restrooms that we've been installing in our parks. This particular bathroom has some features that we like as far as the cleanability of it, the durability of it, and the security aspects of it. It will consist of basically 2 universal ADA stalls, and then it has a service area that runs between them that makes the bathroom very easy to service and to keep supplies on site. Currently, like the bathroom at Mitchell Park, which does not have a storage facility back there, that every time actually the maintenance comes, they actually have to bring all the maintenance materials out there themselves, so this will help a little bit with that process of cleaning. Of course, then looking just at the inside of the restroom itself, it uses stainless steel amenities there. You can see that the sink as well as the towel dispensers are all built into the wall, so they're all hardened and more difficult to damage. And we think that this provides us the lowest maintenance, the longest lasting facility, as well as providing, I think, that the security that is always important to the surrounding community for it. The idea of the bathrooms that would be open during park hours. I know the park closes at 10. I'm not quite sure exactly, Darren, when the opening of a park is. 7?
Yeah, depends on the park, but yeah, depends on the park. Woodhills Park's at 8:30.
And the bathroom then also has the option of securely locking itself during the closed hours. It has some safeguards to it where it has a motion detector light inside of it that if there is movement in there, that you can see it, so patrol officers can see that someone is in there. This bathroom also has the ability to control the amount of time that the door is locked, so you can set it at different intervals. Most of the time it's set at 10 minutes, so at 10 minutes the door will unlock itself. So you can't just lock yourself in the bathroom itself, which is a nice security feature as well.
What are the walls made out of?
The walls are, and this is something that we reviewed with the community at the community meeting on November 15th. You see 2 samples images up there. One with a concrete board is basically the exterior, that's the light version, and the green version is an aluminum sheet metal, basically, exterior. I think in the meeting, the community liked the concrete board more. It also allows itself to be painted in multiple different colors. It's easy to maintain and easy to paint, and the initial paint will come with an anti-graffiti layer on it that will help that process over a few years until, of course, that wears off over time, but it can be painted very easily. The other nice aspects about it is that the bathroom has good ventilation on the top, which for most public restrooms is kind of a key to keeping it clean on the inside. The bathroom itself, of course, is brought on the back of a truck and it's just set into space. The other interesting aspect about this bathroom is it doesn't require a lot of large footings or concrete pads, so it saves a little cost there in the actual disruption. I mentioned we have to bring the sewer there, but there is already water and power at that location, so the utilities set up very nicely for having a restroom in that area. Again, the other and I guess larger scale aspect of the project of the replacing of the synthetic turf. The idea is to replace it with the same turf that we used at El Camino and the Stanford playfields. That turf, we went through a process of testing the turf for different contaminants. That has been a question in the past about turf. Mostly the contaminants were embodied in the recycled rubber infill that was used, mostly recycled tires, which did have some runoff contaminants to it. We no longer use that material anymore. The infill material that we're using now is a TPE material, which is a better material that is free of the toxins that the tire crumble had before. So we're comfortable with using this material. I think, as I mentioned in our staff report, we're always interested if a contractor would like to use something different, but it would have to meet the requirements that we set up in that original test, which were based off a federal figures for pollutant amounts, basically the contaminants of lead and substances of that. The one thing that we haven't decided yet that we will have more conversations with the user groups about is the striping of the field. Currently, right now, the field is just striped for soccer. The current Stanford field has one that's striped for soccer and then one that stripes for soccer and lacrosse. So lacrosse may be something that we can add as far as striping to the field, but because it's not programmed that way right now, I think would behoove us to have more feedback from the actual users groups that are mostly using that field on if we want to introduce a new play type to that field. The other aspects of the project, which I mentioned in the staff report, that are going to be bid alternate items is replacing which is now a decomposed granite running track around the field to an all-weather rubberized track. And you can see in the blue in this slide here is the location of basically where that rubber would be installed. The image at the bottom is, and I really haven't found a legitimate answer of why, but apparently that the track material and the most economic track material is of the red color. So we will probably be going in that direction. That seems to be it. All the tracks are installed that way, and there's extra for if you want to change the color to a blue or a green. So I think red will probably be the direction that we were going. Again, this is all kind of based upon the bids that we get back. We would like to do this work. It's part of the CIP that is put forward in the budget book. But again, with rising and the escalation of construction, we're just going to hold it as a bid alternate to make sure that if we do go over, that we can still move forward with the synthetic turf field, because that's the kind of the most important aspect of getting it replaced out there. And another smaller aspect of that was a smaller rubberized surfacing next to the bathroom area that could be used for group or individuals to do stretching or other physical activity kind of unprogrammed there. That just allows a space for that to occur. The restroom itself will go through the ARB process. We'll present a palette of colors to them, and in that process select basically what color the building is going to be painted. Our hopes is that we can produce the bid package here in the next couple of months and get it out to bid. So when the funding comes available, which for the track is in June of 2019, or for the synthetic field and the track, I should say, that we are ready to move on that. The down period of the field use kind of occurs between June and through the halfway point of August. So we'd like to, as best as possible, get the field back to usable conditions again for when sports start to rev up themselves back in the fall. The restroom will also coincide, work with that. It may start a little bit after that, just so it's not in the way of the turf being installed, and hopefully the track as well. So it probably will be completed in the fall, I would say, a month or two after basically the track is done. That is the kind of proposed timeline for it. I'll turn to the commission for any questions about the project itself.
Jeff?
Sure. Excited about this project and getting the field replaced. And glad also to hear about, I was curious about the toxins and the infill and what kind of progress has been made with that, which is exciting. A few questions. With the restroom, is it air dryer only for your hands, or is this a paper towels, or what would we be doing with that?
There's the option for both there. I haven't discussed with facilities the way that they would like to go on that. Usually they like to rather have the hand dryer so they don't have to keep installing paper towels in it.
Right.
So I would imagine that's probably what it's going to have.
And who takes care of the maintenance of those? Is that something that's contracted out, or is that something that
I believe
city
we
staff
do
takes care of?
contract out the bathroom. I don't know if it's through what vendor actually does it, but it is we do have a contractor that does clean the bathrooms.
Okay. I'm very much in favor of hopefully getting that track installed. Would be exciting. Are there any possibilities of any partnerships with any groups or any running groups or anything, or any outreach, or I don't know if there's any, as we've done with other projects, looking at funding shortfalls and determining what user groups might be interested. And I don't know how much of a shortfall we would be talking about, of course, but I think the need, there's not that many tracks for people to use. I know that the high schools and Stanford, but besides that, it's something that's not there. And I also think that with the installation of it, there could be great use by the city, whether it's for different kinds of camps or different kinds of activities or events, if we had a track such as that.
I'm not quite sure what the group is, but I have received an email stating that there is a stakeholder group that's interested in donating some money. It's a modest amount compared to the whole project, but they are interested in doing that if it needs some boost in the funding to get us there. We have not done any type of other outreach as far as the funding goes and asking for that amount. But
what do you anticipate if there is a shortfall? I mean, is there any way to even estimate, or too early in the process?
yeah, it's hard to say just on the climate of the way that prices keep going up. So, if the shortfall, I think, is under $100,000, then that's probably gives us the option of maybe going out to the public and getting some funding for that. I think when it starts to get over that amount, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to do.
Yeah, if I could tag on, at the public meeting where we discussed this with the public, we had hoped that we'd be able to do this. And now getting fresher estimates that Peter's put together, it really feels like a long shot. So from my perspective, I just want to do a reality check. I think it is unlikely that we'll be able to do the synthetic track with this project. The great part is what we did here. I received 20 emails alone from people who regularly hike it, and they pointed out the same things you did. Great community asset, perfect for exercise for adults and multi-generational ages. So I think we've got good documentation that it would be a great enhancement. It's desired. I think that it won't be possible with this particular project.
What's something like that cost, a track? Is there, I just out of...
It costs between $800,000 and $1.2 million, basically.
But what I would suggest is, what we've learned is, and Peter helped inform me about this, is it would not be prohibitive to build the field as planned and come back and do the track at a future part. So, they're not mutually exclusive, and I think we can reevaluate how much funding we have and submit another project request in the not too distant future. Great. If we're not able to fund it, which, again, I just want to make sure we set expectations based on reality, and I think it'd be a challenge to make it happen.
I appreciate that and appreciate your work. Thanks, guys.
How's the track used today? Is it just people dropping in and running around it, or is there any organized use?
Mainly just impromptu drop-in use.
And if we put a rubberized track, would we expect to have organized use, or would it just still be drop-in use?
I think there eventually would be organized use. I think the demand would be great.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I'm just wondering if we shrunk it down to 6 lanes or something smaller, would that meet all our use? But now, if you're talking about organized uses, a 6-lane track would not be nearly as good. Okay. Oh, is this our last crumb rubber field? All the other turf
That's correct.
fields have been replaced with the new
TPE,
virgin latex?
thermoplastic elastomer.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Always wondered that.
And these are the prefab bathrooms. Have we used them in our parks before?
Not this particular one. It's being used now quite a bit in the South Bay. San Jose is using it, and I think down at Morgan Hill they've started to install a few of them. I've seen it installed, so it's a hardened bathroom. It's a little more hardened than I think our other option that we started looking at was the golf course prefabricated bathroom, but it doesn't have as much security measure, I think, and it's not as hardened as this bathroom is, which is going to be a little bit more used. The golfers are a little bit more gentle on restroom facilities than standard park users, so.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
So, Darren, with respect to the track, are there any interim steps you can take for the current track to help shore it
Yeah.
up, weatherize it?
Right, and Peter's got that built in. So at a minimum, we'll be able to address some of the challenges. We've got low spots, so a
Right.
regrading would be in order, and perhaps some hardening agent, which is typically a decomposed granite to help shuttle water off and drain correctly. So it'll
Okay.
hold up a little bit better.
So that's all part of the CIP in all events?
That one, yeah, that one we can afford.
Okay,
I'm
great.
confident.
With respect to the bathroom itself, will there be an infant changing station in either one?
Yes, and actually this one has, the changing station is engineered for adults as well, so it's inclusive
Great.
in that respect.
Perfect. With respect to the location of the bathroom, I think that at a prior meeting, there was a note that some of the seasonal lighting, right, the mobile lighting that's being put in place at Coverly may presently be in the location where the bathroom is planned for. Is that what I understood?
You know, when we presented this at that community meeting, the gentleman, Neil Arnson, who leads that endeavor to do the temporary lighting, was there and didn't see any conflicts with the location proposed.
Okay, so you think that you'll be able to continue to accommodate the seasonal lighting with the bathroom location?
I believe so.
Great. Thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you for the presentation. I think you definitely have the priorities set correctly. I think the field certainly is screaming out for refurbishment, and adding the bathrooms, the restrooms is a very high priority for that area. And getting the separate bids for the track and the workout area, I think is great. That's definitely the right way to go. I have a question about the workout area. Would it be possible for the extensions outside the oval track to be used for that workout, that type of workout, rather than adding a separate area?
It is, the track is a different material than actually it's tighter, and it's not as attenuated just because it's meant to have spikes in it, and that's the spikes not to tear it apart. The workout area would be using more of a playground type of rubber matting, which has a little bit more attenuation to it. So I think that you definitely could use the track. There's no doubt about it. It's a lot softer, of course, than the
Just
dirt.
thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, if, again, both items are bid alternates, we would definitely do the track before we did the workout area, just depending upon the price, though, of course. But if we did the track and not the workout area, definitely people would start to use the track for that purpose. So,
But if the track is in the $1 million plus or minus $200,000 range, presumably the workout area would be much lower than that.
Yes,
So perhaps that could
significantly
be
lower.
included in the first phase, so it could be done before the track?
that would be nice, yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Is there any consideration for a changing table, a flip-down changing table in the restroom?
I think that was a question that Ryan asked, and yes, both of the restrooms have it, and actually it's engineered for actually adults to use it. Just going along with the more inclusive idea that cognitive development doesn't preclude adults, so.
Okay, sounds like first aid station too, maybe. Regarding the turf selection criteria, I know there have been some issues at El Camino Park with rippling and bunching problems and some general tears at the seams, and I've also seen some issues at Mayfield. So I'm a little concerned about what we've just put in. It doesn't seem to be wearing as well as we'd hope it would be. I'm certainly getting a lot of feedback from the community on this, and hope that we will consider this when we make our next selection.
Absolutely. Peter and I have talked also about building into this contract. The modern contracts are phased a little differently than previously done, at least for the city of Palo Alto. This new one, my hope and intention is that it'll be incumbent upon the contractor to come back regularly and fill, whereas our pre-existing one fell upon staff to do that. And sometimes the installer will say, well, there's problems with the infill. That's why such and such seam failed, and so all the liability shifts over to the installer, which is the way I'd prefer it.
Right.
Which I think will help with some of those problems.
And perhaps there can be some wording in the contract that the lines that are put on top of the turf in a different color shouldn't fail within X period of time, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
So we're not doing well at El Camino Park. Regarding the striping plan that's currently just for soccer, would this be both one long field and 2 short fields cross width?
Yes, definitely.
In different colors, obviously. Great. And just one other request I've heard from referees, actually, is to have some sort of the turf laid out in such a way that there's some sort of a pattern that you can kind of see across, so you can be squared on the line. So when the field is laid out, to go long ways rolling it out, so when there's some sort of lines, you can kind of see them along the way, and we can talk more about this if what I'm saying isn't clear. That's all. Really look forward to getting this completed. The schedule is you've said is prioritized well as also.
Okay, good.
So you're suggesting that when they mow the turf, they mow it all?
Precisely, thank you. I was having problems getting the words out.
Just a couple of comments. The bathroom, either picture there doesn't look particularly attractive. It looks like a cinder block building or whatever. And obviously our concerns are not only safety and all the issues of locking it, but then cleanliness. And I always believe people show more respect to something that's attractive in the first place. And I'm questioning whether we've gone far enough with attractiveness, and maybe we should even go to the Arts Commission and see about getting it painted with flowers on the outside, or something that just shows that more attention was paid to its attractiveness. In Carmel, I don't know if it's the same vendor or not, but it sure looks like the same inside, and it was all brought in on a truck and lowered in. But it's now built with rocks all around it. The whole walls are rocks. And in fact, talking about rooftop gardens, it's got a rooftop garden on it. And everybody thought that was kind of neat. It was an attractive thing in Carmel. I would encourage us to do something like that showed some interest in having it kept attractive. I'm not as enthusiastic about track. I think that when in terms of scarce resources and money that we're spending, and we're trying to spend it with youth, and we're trying to spend it with adults, and we're trying to spend it with seniors and so on, particularly in a concentrated facility like this, I kind of doubt that a walking track would be substantially less expensive than a running track, but I'll bet it would be something less expensive. And in terms of who the users are, I've always asked the question, who are we designing this for, this whole facility? And I think we're designing the sports fields for the athletes, and maybe the track could not be for the athletes, it could be for the casual walkers, or it could be for the wellness crowd, or something, and maybe that would cause us to have a different design point. Because even when you talk about, the stretching and exercise facility, you could go even further and make sure that there was, something associated with that relative to senior exercise, and that would be a better design point. Now we're making it for the whole community, not just for one cohort. And my last question is, I can't remember from being there whether there's a good bike rack installation or not, but I hope that that's part of the considerations.
Yes, definitely will.
Anybody have any other comments or questions? Or Peter, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you again.
So the one item is tentative agenda for December 18th. I think we've already said we'll have pickleball on that agenda, and I don't know if the purple pipe question that you asked, Keith, if that's something we should try and bring into that meeting or come later.
I don't think there's a rush. If they had
Yeah.
something on the shelf that they could give us, fine, but I'd rather have them take a couple months and give us a good
fine.
answer.
Okay. Is there anything else that people would like to have?
Darren, do you think we'll be ready for the policy review by the next meeting?
The park rules and regs, I think I'm going to need more time. I think that one's going to probably be in the new year.
Okay.
And I apologize for that.
Did you mention that Actera was coming?
Actera
or-
will do a partner presentation, yes, and with all the items that we had talked about in the email with Chair McDougall.
Okay.
I should also note, we can bring the CIPs for discussion at the December meeting.
CIPs and pickleball all in one night. Kristen?
Yeah, we may or may not have something to discuss with respect to aquatics, and then I believe Monique might be giving a presentation on the Aspen Institute final dialogue report on future of libraries and community services.
Right.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sure. So Monique received a grant. Was it a grant, Monique? Yes. It was a grant from the Aspen Institute to do some work on the future of libraries, and we brought community services into that discussion too. And it was a all-day retreat, and Commissioner McDougall was there. There were members of all different organizations from the community, other commissions, other groups, and it was a conversation about libraries and community services and the future of our organizations, and how we can continue to partner with each other and other organizations as well. So there's a report that has just been completed on that conversation that was had, and Monique will come and give a brief presentation on the outcome.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. It was a really interesting day. I think they did a nice job with that. So I think we've got a long enough list, and the challenge will be to come up with the right topics. So we'll move on. Are there any comments, announcements, any ad hoc things that people would like to bring up? Keith, you have your light on.
Okay. North Ventura is still going on. We have monthly meetings on that. There's a website, so I'd encourage other commissioners to look at what material that's on the website. If you have any comments that you want me to relay, please send them to me.
I'm going to make sure it's GSI compliant.
Yes. We have not talked about GSI on that yet, but there's a big interest both in the creek, could that be unconcreted and make it accessible, and also Boulevard Park? Do we have interaction with that?
Right. And she did mention Ventura plan tonight, so that, Jeff, anything that you have to report from any of your commissions? Jeff?
Just one further comment. I was encouraged by council to continue pushing for a meeting between the Parks and Rec Commission and City Council. I know that Kristen has communicated that we're not in line to get this done this year, but let's continue the push and get it scheduled soon, please.
I have an announcement. There's a tentative ceremony being planned. Right now, it's December 17th. That date may shift around right around that time for a signing ceremony for the 101 pedestrian bike bridge. It's where the Water District, some other agency, is going to sign basically the approval to start constructing the bridge. And I think Google is involved as well with some donation that they're making towards the construction of the bridge. So I'll email something out to the commission if you want to attend that. I think that the city council members, the mayor will be there. It'll be kind of not the start off to construction, but a sign that we're getting close to start constructing that overpass. So.
I'm sure that Jeff would call this a soft opening. But I think we would appreciate knowing about it, because I think there's people who are interested enough that they might want to attend. I would only mention that the BioBlitz that was planned for Bixby, I forget whether that was a week or 2 weeks ago, was canceled by Kathleen because of the smoke, and has been moved to January, or will be moved to a January date. And I would still encourage people to think about participating in that. Other than that, I would call for a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.